In our previous video, the last one, number 19, print, we printed out our structural elements, and now what we want to do is add some exterior walls to this. We're going to add what is known as a curtain wall. And curtain walls are walls that are exterior to the surface of the structure. In other words, they are on. Let's zoom in here for a second. And we'll just say, so a curtain wall is outside of the structure, so it's right here, and it has a certain structural ability to it and makes it unique to other types of walls where we may put the wall on the interior here in the form of a storefront, an infill system. So we're going to do curtain walls and go through different curtain wall systems. There are basically two types of curtain wall systems. Opaque curtain walls and transparent curtain walls. The more common names are a curtain wall such as a MetalStud curtain wall and a glass curtain wall. So those are the most common terms. So let's create a MetalStud wall first. That's probably the most common for this small a building. To do that, we need to bring us up a view first. So let's start on the first floor. So I'm going to open up a first floor view. Let's get rid of some things we really don't need. Those were just temporary. I'm going to hide this. That was our temporary site. Let's add some walls to this structure. I'm also going to come in here and make this fine so that I can zoom in here and I can see. So here's the edge of my structure, and I'm going to add that wall to the outside here of the structure, which is where a curtain wall would be. So let's go into walls, and we're going to go into what they call architectural walls, and we'll see a whole range of different architectural walls. We're going to start with a brick MetalStud wall, and I'm going to modify it to show you how you build your own. I wouldn't recommend you just take out of the box the wall systems that they give you in the default Revit, that you actually go in and make your own. So I'm going to open that up, and then I'm going to edit the type, and I'm going to duplicate it. And in this case, I'm going to keep the term exterior so that we can separate exterior from interior walls. And I'm going to call this MetalStud with stucco, which is not an uncommon curtain wall system to use. And then let's go see how it's built. First, there's some coarse fill patterns or some of these stuff here, but let's go in and look at how that wall's built. And they've given us the capability to look at the wall either in section or in plan so that we can see its different layers. And we're more familiar with looking at a wall section, a wall in section rather than plan. And all I did was click in the and now I'm using the middle button of the mouse to move around in. And if you'll see, the primary structure of this wall is the MetalStud, and that's been added as a material, a MetalStud layer. 6 inches, and that's probably, for this story building, 6 inches would be structurally sound and also give us a good thickness for putting insulation in. And you can see right here what I've selected. When I select something else, it turns blue, right? So out from that, there's a variety of different ways to build the wall, and I'll show you some example. First, this will give you an idea of where the wall sits in relationship to the structure. And then let's take a look here. Okay, and this may not be as easy to see in this video. I'll try to make it a little bit larger if I can here. Okay, if I make it any larger, I think it's going to get real fuzzy. Yeah, you can see it's kind of fuzzy. But you can see here's the MetalStud, and it's connecting to the structure. You can see the different connections, and we can talk about that when we get into details. As I said, sometimes a wall may be placed inside the structure. This is usually not referred to as a curtain wall because it is not exterior to the structure. This is usually referred to as an infill wall. So but what we're doing is this condition right here, and then the different layers of that edge. So here is our steel stud. You can see the horizontal members right here, the steel studs. And then the different layers on the outside. And basically, to all steel stud curtain walls, there's going to be 3 layers that are common to all of them. And those are the steel stud itself, the exterior sheathing, and then there'll be an exterior insulation, because the model energy code now requires that we have a continuous insulation, not just cavity insulation, but a continuous insulation. And then there'll be a finish. Usually that's, of course, chipboard in most cases, but not always. We can choose differently. So we have a substrate or sheathing in there, and then some kind of air infiltration barrier, which is a good idea. That's set to 0 because it's so thin it really doesn't matter. And then this is a brick wall, so it has a, we can see right here, it has an airspace in there. 3 inches is a little steep, maybe 1.5 inches, but we're not going to do brick finish anyway, so I'm going to delete that. And I'm going to add in a layer though, so I'm going to just go insert, and it added it as a structural layer, and that's not what I want. I want a thermal layer, and I'm going to add rigid insulation. So I'm going to type in rigid, see if it shows up. Yeah, okay, so I've already got it loaded into my library. So I've loaded rigid insulation in here. It's basically an R5 for polystyrene, and that's what the code requires, at least an R5. So I'm going to put a 1-inch material in there, and you can see it has the insulation. So here's my substrate. There's my air infiltration. And there's always a debate, and it depends on the material that you're going to be using, whether the rigid insulation goes behind the sheathing from the outside or whether it's in front of the sheathing, as in this case. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to move the rigid insulation down, and I'm going to put it next to the steel stud, and I'm going to place my sheathing on the outside towards my exterior finish. Now I have brick there right now, so I'm going to change that, and I'm going to add that in as stucco. So, and you'll notice it wasn't in my project library of materials, so I'm going to go down here, and it did find it in both of these material libraries, and add it by hitting the little up arrow into, and you can see the different settings that are made for it. And I'm going to say apply. Okay, and now I have this changed to stucco, but it's not 3 5/8. As a general rule, it's 7/8 to 1 inch, and I'm just going to make it 1 inch. And stucco, and this is typical stucco wall here. We'll zoom in a little bit. It's probably going to get a little fuzzy, but there'll be some kind of building paper that'll go on top of our sheathing. And here's the lath, right? Metal lath, and then there's what they call a scratch coat, and then what we call the brown coat, and then the finish coat. And these are all, these two are 3/8 of an inch, and I think this is like 1/8 of an inch. But that's a typical stucco buildup. But I'm not going to show all those layers in here. There's really no reason to. We would probably, in a detail, we would draw those details in. All I'm going to do is identify this as stucco. So we got rigid insulation against the steel stud. We've got plywood sheathing. We've got an air infiltration barrier, and then our stucco, and then metal stud. And then on the inside, in this particular wall, they've got a vapor barrier. That might be a good thing in San Antonio. That keeps the moisture inside the building from migrating. In Lubbock, I probably wouldn't have that vapor barrier at all because it's so dry. Same thing with like Phoenix or even in all of New Mexico. But we'll just leave it in since we're doing it in San Antonio. We'll just assume we're going to put a vapor retarder here. And then gypboard. If this had to be a fire rated wall, this would have to go from 1/2 inch to 5/8 inch to be 1 hour fire rated. So we're just going to accept this right now. I'm going to come back and explain some of these other things in other videos, but as well as this default wrapping at inserts and at end walls. So now we're ready to, the reason I got that error was because this substrate has to be touching the structure. There can't be a non-structural element between it, because then this doesn't isn't structural. So that's one reason to have that next to the structure, so it will be structural and be added to the rigidness of the building. So I moved it. I'm going to move the plywood sheathing next to the steel studs, and then put the insulation on the outside of that. And that means then that this would probably move to here. Okay. With that done, we'll get an acceptance. Now we'll close this. So we got a metal stud now with a stucco finish. And now we're ready to build the walls, and this is really kind of the easy part. In other words, the first thing we need to look at is our Z settings. We want the base constraint to be the finished floor, but we don't want the top constraint to be unconnected. We actually want it to go currently to the top of the roof. And you know, actually what I'd like to do is have this extend all the way to the top of the parapet. So before I draw a wall, I'm going to go into my wall section here. Oh, there we go. I've got a top of roof, but what I'm going to do is add another level in here real quick. And this level I'm going to call top of parapet. And it's set to 6 feet. And since we're going to have a habitable roof, I'm just going to say 36 inches here. Could be as low as 32. That's a handrail height, but it'd probably discourage people if it's 36 inches high. It'll discourage most people from trying to climb up or sit on it, and we really don't want people sitting on it. So I'm just going to close that view right there. Now with that done, I'm ready to put my wall in, and so I'm going to go back to walls here, architecture, walls, architectural walls, and here's my metal stud with stucco, and I'm going to set its height now not to the top of the roof but to the top of the parapet. I don't want any offset either at the base or at the top. Let's start to draw a line, so I'm going to snap to the end point of that, and you'll see there's my wall right there. And of course these layers you see right here, of course, are the insulation and all that, so that's to the exterior of the building. But as I go to draw this, let's just undo that. But as I go to draw this, notice that it's on the interior. Okay, and if I want to just flip it, all I have to do is hit the space bar, and that's going to flip it from inside to outside. See, just simple space bar. But you'll notice it's being set at the center of the line, and actually I don't want it set to the center line. I want it set to that line right there. So what I'm going to do, change the setting right up here that says location line. That's the line that locates the wall. And I want it to be on the interior of the core. This is the core. The core is everything within that core boundary, the structural core boundary right there, which is the steel stud, right? So I'm going to select this and hit delete key. And let's go back in now and try building a wall again. And once again, it's flipped again to the inside, hit the space bar, and now that's what I want right there. We'll just stop right there. So now what I want to do is turn the corner for this project. I'm just going to make this go all the way to here. Now one thing that you may notice, if I was going to leave this open, I'm going to come in and put a glass curtain wall right here, but this end of the wall is going to be open. There's no wrap. Okay, this is called a wrap right there. The same thing is true if I go over here to the other side. There's no wrap here. And so to make that so it wraps, I'm going to select that and go into edit type, and you'll see right here wrapping at inserts, that's like a window or door, but wrapping at ends is set to none. I'm going to say, yeah, let's wrap this at the exterior. Now one way I can check that out before I get out of here, if I have this so anyway, so I'm going to say OK to that, apply it, say OK, and now you'll see all my exterior materials wrap themselves and ended right there. And actually I'm going to want this to go all the way out, okay, and probably actually go all the way out. My stucco is over the edge of the slab. Now you can see my whole wall here is thicker than my slab edging that I put here, so I may have to go back, extend my slab out so that it can be poured all the way to the edge. But we can do that later. Right now we're not going to worry about that. So now I have my wall in here. If I go into a 3D view, Let's just open a default 3D view. We can see there's my walls right there. If I go around, of course, you'll notice that you don't see any of the layers in a 3D view, okay, unless you render it. So, but now I've got my curtain wall, my steel curtain wall. It's in place and ready to go. The next thing I'm going to do is show you how to put a storefront into that wall.